Good morning, it's Wednesday, August 24th, 2011, and I bet you already know what we'll be talking about this morning. Yes, Hurricane Irene is a Category 3 hurricane, and it looks like it's strengthening even more so. First, let's go over what's happening right now over the northern Atlantic and much of the United States. Currently, high pressure is moving off of the East Coast, and as a result, we still have some lingering dry air, but moist air advection is clearly starting to take hold as a much more humid air mass over the southeast starts to invade the northern mid-Atlantic. So what we can expect for today is increasing clouds and also an increase in humidity as we move into the afternoon hours, and temperatures rebounding into the lower to mid 80s, possibly a few upper 70s along portions of Long Island. This cold front is going to be part one of a very interesting forecast coming up over the next several days. This cold front will approach the northern mid-Atlantic by tomorrow evening and produce scattered showers and thunderstorms. It will also pull our hurricane that is currently over the eastern Bahamas to the northwest towards the southeast coast. So let's take a look at the latest satellite picture. And as you can see, here's Irene. It is intensifying over the Bahamas and starting to move northwest in response to our upper level trough and cold front that is moving to the east through the Great Lakes. Now this cold front and this trough will not turn Irene, but it will force Irene closer to the coast and pull it towards the North Carolina coast. One interesting feature that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is the influence of this disturbance. Could create some increased shear that currently is not expected and could weaken Irene just a little bit. We're going to have to keep an eye on that as, well, none of the models really forecasted this disturbance to have much of an impact. But as always, weather keeps us on our toes. So let's take a look at Irene itself. Well, Irene is looking very impressive this morning. As you can see, we have a very well developed eye. We have a strong central dense overcast, plenty of convection surrounding the center of our circulation, and Irene is expanding in coverage, and the upper level high pressure system is also well established. You can see the well established outflow and inflow patterns. This is basically a textbook hurricane. Now as of 8 a.m. the analysis showed that Hurricane Irene was a major hurricane at 115 miles per hour with pressures rapidly falling. Since then, Irene has become very well organized. The eye wall is far more distinctive and very tight, and you can see plenty of high cloud tops developing around Irene. All of this points to rapid intensification, which is why in my forecast, which I'll show shortly, I went above the NHC forecast of just a Category 3 hurricane, and I think this could become a Category 4 hurricane. As for the track, you can see it's starting to move more to the northwest as we move forward in time, which is a very important aspect to this forecast as it concerns the northern mid-Atlantic. The further north that Irene gets now, the more likely Irene stays off the coast later. Just want to pull up the latest stats, and here we are again at 8 a.m. We have a sustained winds at 115 miles per hour. That makes it a Category 3 hurricane. Moving to the west-northwest, or 300 degrees, at 9 miles per hour. The pressure is just crashing. At 5 a.m., the pressure was around 962. Now it's down to 957, falling rapidly, clearly a sign of intensification. And since it is 10:47 right now, see, well, here we are. Here's the 11 a.m. catching up right now, right as I'm recording. And as I was pointing out, Irene turns more to the northwest, which is very important. Maximum sustained winds remain at 115 miles per hour and pressures at 956. So, what can we expect from Hurricane Irene? Well, first of all, I just want to go over the National Hurricane Center track here as of 5 days, and if it loads, here we are. And you can see that the National Weather Service is taking Irene further and further east, and I'm going to show why the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center is doing this, and then compare it to the forecast track that I have on my website, which I put out as of 6:30 this morning. As you can see, Irene turns to the northwest, turns to the north, and then starts to go to the north-northeast towards Long Island. Still would have an impact on the Jersey Shore and Long Island, but not as much of an impact for eastern Pennsylvania, if this track holds true. And again, the fact that Irene is moving more towards the eastern portions of the Bahamas would make it more likely for a more eastward track, if certain aspects of the forecast pan out. So why is Irene turning to the northwest right now? Glad you asked that. This is the water vapor satellite picture of North America. Notice our trough here. Now here's Irene, should I say, way out in the Atlantic right here by the Bahamas, right on the edge. Here is our first trough with our cold front. And this trough is starting to have an influence on Irene. It's starting to pull it more to the northwest. So, as we move forward in time, you could see why Irene would want to move to the northwest, because it's being drawn to this trough. But this trough is not moving to the southeast, it's actually moving to the east and the northeast. What this basically means is that this trough is going to start to lift out of the eastern United States before being able to turn Irene to the northeast. So it's going to remain on a northwest trajectory, perhaps jogging a little bit north, and then this trough leaves. And that's the next question here, because the reason why I really like the European model guidance is because it usually handles upper level disturbances with the polar jet stream far better over the northern Pacific than the GFS model guidance. And what we're dealing with in order to turn Irene to the northeast and keep it off of the New Jersey coast and keep it far enough away from the New York City and Philadelphia metropolitan area to not have a major impact, is that this trough has to pick up Irene and kick it out. If the timing and strength of this trough over here in the Pacific is off by just a few hours, or it's just a little bit weaker, then we end up with a track much closer to the coast. One other aspect to consider moving forward is that we have what's called a negative NAO pattern, which the GFS has been performing woefully on. It's been absolutely horrible. That aspect of this pattern is going to be very interesting to keep an eye on, because a negative NAO pattern tends to slow down these troughs just a little bit. Normally not significantly enough to make a major difference in a basic forecast, whether it's cold front passage and showers and thunderstorms. But when it comes to the timing of a hurricane and the exact track, it could make all the difference. And it's something that we're going to keep an eye on, and it's why, although the models have shifted east this morning, well, that really doesn't mean much, because models do not control the weather. Physics and meteorological law does. And until we get a real handle on this trough in the northern Pacific, we better keep an eye on the exact track of Irene. So, considering that aspect, here is my forecast, which pretty much goes along with what is happening this morning with this track moving to the northwest and turning north-northwest and eventually north. I'm looking for a landfall around eastern North Carolina, perhaps the Outer Banks. And then as we move north and we head towards Sunday morning, here's the forecast for Sunday morning, I'm expecting Irene to be a strong hurricane, perhaps a major hurricane with 115 mile per hour winds, very heavy rain along the coast, and Irene's going to start to pick up speed and move to the northeast. Now, notice on my area of potential tracks that I put more weight on the eastern side of this track than the western. I think the farthest west that Irene could go is basically around the Delaware River up towards the eastern Hudson Valley region. I don't think it can move any further west than that because of our approaching trough that I'll show in the European model guidance. But if this trough is a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, then Irene would move much further east. It may even move far enough east to have very limited impacts on the New Jersey coast, much like the hurricane from last year. I forgot the name of it, but if you remember the hurricane from last year, it was a lot of media speculation about the potential of impacting the New Jersey coast, but in reality it moved far enough east and had less of a potential impact on the New Jersey shore because of two factors. One, hurricanes, they tend to track up into the northern Mid-Atlantic, weaken on the western side much faster because of the influence of dry air on the land, which tends to collapse the precipitation shield far faster. Which is why, even if the track is right along the New Jersey coast, I don't expect much of a significant impact over eastern Pennsylvania, because I think the western side of this hurricane will start to collapse rather rapidly as opposed to the eastern side of the track. So still, we're going to keep an eye on exactly what Irene does, and I'm going to wait to adjust this forecast until we get to the point where we can actually sample the disturbance that will eventually kick Irene off the coast. Otherwise, moving the forecast track left and right with each model guidance does nothing but create volatility and confusion. And I don't think that you deserve that. So we're going to keep this forecast in place. Be prepared, but don't get over anxious. And get your normal supplies. Make sure your house is prepared for any type of flash flooding. And worst comes to worst, you'll be prepared for the next potential hurricane. Now, I just want to show the European model guidance real fast. I want to show exactly what I'm talking about as far as this disturbance. This disturbance right here is what's going to kick out our hurricane. So as we move in time, you can see that in 24 hours it's moving over Western Canada, dives over Central Canada, and meanwhile our cold front and our trough is turning our hurricane to the north, drawing it towards North Carolina. Notice the interaction here. And then, at 72 hours, Irene heads towards the North Carolina coast. Notice there's a break in this ridge. We have the ridge is building over a little bit over the top of the hurricane, which might force it towards a west-northwest track briefly. And then here's our kicker. Again, this disturbance originally was here. So again, with poor sampling, we're going to keep an eye on exactly how strong this trough is. By Saturday night, here's our trough over the St. Lawrence River Valley. On the European guidance, it's a little bit weaker in this portion of the United States, which could make all the difference as far as how fast Irene turns to the northeast. If this trough is a little bit deeper, say goodbye to Irene. It's going to stay well off the coast. If it's about this strength on the European guidance, we're going to be dealing with a hurricane that's going to be rapidly moving northeast along the New Jersey coast and towards either the New York City metro or portions of western Long Island. If it's really delayed, then we got some problems. So again, we got to keep an eye on this hurricane and see exactly where it tracks. And eventually it starts to become entrained in the overall pattern. And moving forward, that can create some interesting dilemmas for the North Atlantic and the negative NAO pattern. But at least high pressure returns by Monday and Tuesday. So clearly we're dealing with a very active and interesting weather pattern, one that is very complicated and very fluid. Do not let your guard down with this hurricane, and just stay tuned to NYNJPA Weather for the latest on Hurricane Irene.